In this fast-paced world, it often seems impossible to balance what the Bible says about health and wholeness with the latest scientific information. With the help of these experts, Dr. Caroline Leaf, Dr. Janet McCarroll, and personal trainer Marty Copeland, you can begin the first steps toward health and emotional wholeness in relating to the mind, body, and spirit in this inspiring and informative series, Your Body, His Temple. Now let's join Dr. Caroline Leaf for Session 3, Beating Stress.
Are you ready to de-stress? Yes. We're going to talk this morning about how to de-stress. Yesterday we spoke about how thought forms, how it can become toxic. Now we're going to look at the effects that this toxic thinking has on our body and how to actually control that process. So before we start, I want to talk about the scripture that I have up here. The leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. That is a scripture that God gave me about 15 years ago to put on my business card and to put throughout our organization. We have that scripture. And the reason that I believe that scripture is so important is because the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. Your nerve cells are like trees, and the leaves that you put on your trees, the words that you put on your dendrites, the dendrites that you grow and the information you place there are going to be for your healing or for your destruction. And if as individuals we are healed, if our minds are healed as individuals, and then we're going to be able to heal our nation. So the leaves of the tree, the thoughts that we put in our minds, the minds of our children, the minds of the ed teachers working with the children, that is what's going to heal the nation. So it's so important that we watch what we think, that we watch what we say, that we watch what we're putting inside our head. And if we can understand and have a clear vision of how those thoughts are formed and how they become toxic, we can have a much clearer vision of how to actually change that and make sure those leaves are healthy that we're putting on our trees. So yesterday we spoke as well about the fact that we can change our brain in 4 days. What does that mean? You can spend your entire life messing up your thinking processes, but if you start thinking correctly, if you start controlling through your free will, listening to the message from your heart, if you start doing that, you can actually change the way in which your brain circuitry functions. You can change the neural circuitry. You can change the dendrites that you're growing. You can remove thorns. You can add new branches. So you have power over the way in which your brain and your neural circuitry actually grow. And that is an incredible thing if you think of it. You are not a victim. You're actually in control of what's going on in your brain. So you can mess it up, but within 4 days of thinking correctly, you can start cleaning up your brain. And yes, it's a lifelong process. The process of renewing the mind, which is what we're talking about here, is something that you're going to do daily, all the time, on a constant basis. So it's a constantly applying all the steps that I'm going to be teaching you, the 13 detox steps, understanding how stress works, understanding how thought forms. All this together is a process of helping you to renew the process, to renew your mind. So in just 4 days, you can change the whole pattern of your brain. What you think affects your entire body. 87% of illnesses, mental, physical illnesses that we experience come from our thought life. So if we're thinking toxic, our bodies become toxic. That's just a little image showing you how the neural networks are connected throughout your entire body, which is quite incredible. Your brain speaks to your body, your body speaks to your brain. The mind-body link is constantly an ongoing thing. There's a constant conversation going on, a whole symphony of chemicals playing through your body. There's a whole electromagnetic chemical action occurring in your body 24 hours a day, all the time, communicating. And the way in which we think will affect the functioning of that whole electrical chemical cycle. So let's see what happens with stress. Stress is like a little demon in your head. Now stress is basically, if we don't understand stress, if you understand the demon, it will help you overcome it. Now, people perish for lack of knowledge. If you don't understand what stress is, if you don't understand your brain, if you don't understand how thought becomes toxic, you're not going to be able to control it. So by understanding your brain, by understanding how thought forms, and by understanding the result of toxic thinking, which is stress, you're going to be able to overcome that demon, because stress is literally a demonic stronghold in your mind. When stress goes wrong, it has 3 stages. When stress goes wrong, it becomes a complete demonic stronghold in your mind and completely wrecks the way in which you function intellectually and physically and emotionally. So it's something that we need to understand in order to be able to control. Let me guess, you need a couple of days off because of stress? It's time for professional help if you find yourself trying to deal with stress in these ways. Making a list of things to do that you've already done. Filling out your tax form using Roman numerals. Taking pictures of your boss on watermelons and launching them from high places. Tattooing out to lunch on your forehead. Reading the dictionary upside down and looking for secret messages. Braiding the hairs in each nostril. Writing a short story using alphabet soup. Staring at people through the prongs of a fork and pretending they're in jail. That's my favorite. Making up a language and asking people for directions in it. Do you feel like this at work? Would you excuse me a moment? Someone's trying to get my attention. You know your family's stressed when conversations often begin with put the gun down and then we can talk. The cat's on Valium. You're trying to get your 4-year-old to switch to decaf. No one has time to wait for microwave TV dinners. Family meetings are often mediated by law enforcement officials. Woman remarks for high stress days. Well, this day was a total waste of makeup. Allow me to introduce myself. Stress is when you wake up screaming and you realize you weren't even asleep. Chaos, panic, disorder, my work here is done. Earth is full, go home. Is it time for your medication or mine? I'm not tense, just terribly, terribly alert. That's my favorite. Welcome to Stress City, population too many to count. Every time I give this lecture, every time I go anywhere, every time I just talk to people and just listening to people's conversations, the word I hear the most is I'm stressed. I'm busy, I'm stressed, too much to do, I'm exhausted. And you know, this has really worried me because when I have researched stress over the years, there's 3 stages of stress. And the first stress is necessary for survival. The second and third stages are not necessary for survival. Those are the problems. So if we can understand the 3 stages and understand that stage 1 is good for us and how to manage stage 1, then we can, and recognize the symptoms of stage 2 and stage 3 of stress, we can actually improve our whole lifestyle. Now, what is stress? Let's see how it happens. We have 2 types of emotions, as I mentioned in the last 2 parts of the series. You have faith-based emotions and you have fear-based emotions. Out of the faith-based emotions come all the positive emotions, and out of the fear-based emotions come all the fear-based emotions. Now, faith and fear are spiritual forces and they're opposite. They cannot coexist in a memory. And that is why when you have a toxic thought and you grow thorns, you cannot grow a new memory over the old memory until you've actually removed those thorns through forgiveness, letting go, etc., which removes those thorns, and you can build the new memory over the old memory where you can still remember how the abuse or the pain or whatever, but because you've dealt with it, you can now cope with it. So you can build a new over the old when you've removed the thorns, like unto like. So you can have 2 faith memories together, but you can't have a fear and a faith memory together. So if we look at that principle, as faith decreases, fear will increase. That's how it basically works. So as your thinking starts stinking and becoming toxic, your faith level will start to drop. Your fear level will increase. Your fear will start to dominate. You will start feeling out of control, and you will shift into the reaction that we have to faith decreasing and fear increasing, which is stress. Okay. What is stress? Stress is the mind and body's reaction to any kind of pressure that will disrupt the normal functioning of the body. It's the way that your deep limbic system, deep down inside your brain, all those colored parts of your brain, your chemical factory and the doorway and the corpus callosum and the hippocampus, all those areas over there, they will take your thought life and they will translate that into a physical reaction in your body. So if your thought life is healthy, that physical reaction in your body will be healthy. If your thought life is toxic, the translation will be into an unhealthy, bad stress, the stage 2 or 3 levels of stress. So fear is the root of stress. All stress has a root. Fear is a spiritual force. It's the opposite of faith, as I've already said. So the root of all stress is fear-based. So whenever our body starts moving into a toxic state, with thought patterns going into our physical state in our body and a physical state in our mind, it comes from the root of fear. Now, the only way that Satan has access to the internal state of your mind is through your 5 senses. I mentioned that yesterday. So your 5 senses are your entrance points. That's what Satan will use to get access into the depths of your mind. Now, if he can get in and get your thinking toxic, he can make you sick. So you have to stop that happening. You have to be aware, and that's what we spoke about, the free will, and listen to the message from the heart, and we'll explore that in more depth in the 4th session. But what we have to understand is that five senses, that's where the entry point where things are going to come in at us. So your external source of stress is coming from your 5 senses. And if it's faith-based, it's not going to be a bad form of stress. It's just going to put you into stage 1. But if it's a fear-based stress, it's going to shift you from stage 1 to stage 2 to stage 3. So one has to recognize which type of stress is coming at you. Is it a fear or a faith-based stress? And then to be able to deal with that. So fear This fear, the root of stress is fear. It triggers more than 1,400 known physical and chemical responses in your body and activates more than 30 different hormones and neurotransmitters. And it activates them in such a way that it has an incredible physical effect on your body. If you recognize this image now from looking at the other, watching part 1 and part 2. Now over this part over here is where the magic trees of the mind are, and there your eyes and your ears. Now that is I've just represented 2 of the 5 senses. So this is where the input's going to come in. So your external stressor will come in through your eyes, your ears, and your other 5 senses, and it will come in through the brain, and it will go up into the magic breeze through the trees, and you'll activate that breeze through the trees, which will then activate a reaction in the chemical factory, which will cause a secretion of chemicals, and then the information goes through the host pipe, and your corpus callosum is activated via your free will to think about that information, and then you make a decision based on the message from your heart about what are you going to do about that information that's now coming in at you. So the external stressor will come in and create that reaction. At the same time, it's also activated an internal state as well, because your internal state of mind is in the magic trees of your mind. So the external stressor will also activate an internal reaction. This is all full of memories. So you have an external stressor and you have an internal stressor. So we don't just respond to the external. We'll respond to the internal as well, because you'll have, let's say someone attacks you, or you've had a situation of an abuse or something like that. Let's take an attack. Someone attacks you. Now that's an external stressor. Now that situation happens, you go through the whole stress reaction, etc. But now let's say that you haven't dealt with that issue. You would have then built a memory, a stronghold, a toxic stronghold in your brain, that whenever you're in a similar environment or something reminds you of that attack, that negative toxic stronghold will be reactivated. And in the absence of the external stressor, the internal stressor will put you into the same state. So in other words, if you don't deal with, if someone has hurt you and you haven't forgiven them, if you're bitter towards someone, if you have anger in you, all of those are actually toxic thoughts, which are actually internal stressors, because they will constantly keep your body in a state of stress, shifting over to stage 2 and 3 of stress if you don't get rid of them. I said in the previous session that if you don't deal with a toxic thought, it's going to make you sick. The reason it makes you sick is because those toxic thoughts that you keep activating cause a chemical reaction and an electrical reaction in your body, and that's what we're going to explore today. And it will give you even more reason to release all these toxic thoughts that you have in your brain, because every time you reactivate them, you're putting your body back into stage 2 and stage 3 of stress, which is a very unhealthy state. Now the road to overload. The stressor, as I said, can be an internal from something in your mind or external from something out there. It can be something that you've perceived. It can be just going into a room and seeing a person maybe look at you funny can put you into a state of stress, because you have a perception in your amygdala. Remember the amygdala, that little element where the library books are, can activate a whole stress response in your body, because it can activate this whole thought pattern that this person doesn't like me, or this person's cross with me, or a whole reaction. So we constantly have to watch our internal thought life as well as just the external. We tend to think that stress only comes from the external, but most of the time stress actually comes from what we do with the external inside our head. In fact, most of the time that is the case. It's what do you do with the external inside your thought life through that whole process that we've tracked that will then determine how your body's going to react to that. And you have the choice, as your mind starts thinking all these negative things, you have the choice with your free will to be able to stop that stress reaction happening in your body. So let's see what happens here. There are 3 stages of stress, as I've mentioned. The first stage we call the alarm stage, the alarm reaction. This is where the stress cycle starts. This is the thing that we need when the lion chases you. This is what you need if suddenly you've got to swerve your car, or the kind of thing where you need to have a sudden burst of energy. You are in stage 1 of stress at the moment while you are listening to me, because your brain needs to shift into stage 1 of stress in order to be able to take all the information in that I'm giving you and to be able to build those memories. So you need to be alerted, you need to be activated. Stage 1 of stress basically releases chemicals into your brain, and that whole thought formation process, as the information goes in through the doorway and through that whole process, that is basically part of stage 1 one of stress, because the chemicals that are released there will alert and help with memory building, help you to focus, help you to concentrate, it helps to activate your prefrontal cortex, which is in the front of your brain over here. It helps your deep limbic system to actually be active, to be able to help you to release the correct chemicals. It helps all the different parts of your brain to actually work together to be able to help you to focus and concentrate. Now that is a good thing, and let's see how we feel at that stage. Your heart will beat stronger, your blood will rush to the muscles away from your stomach, the blood sugar will rise, the fats are released into the bloodstream for energy, chemicals are released to make the blood clot faster, you become alert, strong, focused, and memory building starts. Now let's have a look in terms of the nerve cell. We're going to come back to that point in a moment. So in other words, when you're in stage 1 of stress, your nerve cells, there's a nerve cell, is able to actually grow dendrites very effectively and very efficiently. But the problem comes in, so you'll build nice, good, strong memories. The problem comes in is that if you stay in stage 1 of stress for too long. So let's have a look at the exact details of stage 1 of stress. Because if you stay in stage 1 of stress for too long, you're going to shift over into stage 2 of stress, and you're going to start making your toxic thinking worse, or you're going to create another toxic thought. If you have a look over here, the information now, let's take as the situation of someone attacking you. I'm going to track you right back, and if someone comes up to you and attacks you, you're going to have to be able to, or the lion chases you, or in the situation that you're in now where you're listening to information. Information is coming in at you. It's going to go in through the chemical factory, in through that whole process I've tracked, and what's going to happen is that you're going to get a reaction sent back from the internal thought life where your magic trees of your mind are, and back into the chemical factory. And your chemical factory, your hypothalamus specifically, is a responder to your emotional state. It's a responder to the attitude that was activated there. So let's say now let's take a simple example of you listening to me now. The information would have come in, and you would have activated an attitude of, well, we've heard a bit of this last night, now there's new information coming in, and I'm excited about this, I've got a positive attitude, I hope this is happening, and that will then send a message down to the hypothalamus that this is great, let's prepare to build memory, and chemicals will actually start to be secreted. The first chemical that will be secreted is this yellow chemical over here. Now that chemical over there, in small quantities, in the right quantity, is an excellent chemical to start building memory, and it will drop down into the amygdala, and it will go through with the electrical activity and will help to build the whole memory, to get the memory, the dendrites growing onto the magic trees of the mind. That's absolutely great if that happens. However, let's say that you feel very anxious and you can't remember what I said last night, or just weren't able to process it, or you're just having a bad day and you're battling to concentrate. Then what would happen is that that yellow chemical would drop down into this part of your brain over here, which is called the pituitary. And what will happen there is that the chemical will drop down into there, and it will cause the pituitary gland to release that red chemical over there. Now, when you're starting to feel a little anxious, when you are moving over from being alert to shifting to feeling slightly anxious, what will happen is that too much of the yellow is secreted, and that then becomes, when it shifts into that formula, when it shifts into a slightly larger quantity, it becomes the chemical of negative expectations. So it shifts from being a good chemical that builds memory to a chemical of negative expectations. So that yellow chemical over there shifts and changes its formula because it's more of it, and it drops down into the pituitary, and it signals the pituitary gland to secrete that red chemical in large quantities, and that's called the fear hormone. That red chemical over the ACTH is called the fear hormone. So that yellow in large quantities is called the chemical of negative expectations, and that red chemical in large quantities is called the chemical of fear, or the hormone, the chemical ACTH, the hormone of fear expectation. Now, in small quantities, they're absolutely fine. They are necessary for, as I said, for memory building, to be alert, to be focused, to make you strong, on the ball, awake. But when they exceed their limit, they start becoming negative. Let's not talk about stage 1 first before we go into the negative side. Let's talk about the normal cycle, the stage 1 cycle. So you're positive, you're learning, the information's gone in, the yellow chemical's being secreted in the right amounts, the information's flowing through. That yellow chemical will automatically, and the memory's building, but the yellow chemical will automatically cause a little bit of the red chemical to be secreted, just the right amount, not the amount that's going to shift you into fear, just the right amount to keep you alert, to keep your whole body involved in the process of learning. That drops down into the over to here. On top of these are the kidneys, and on top of the kidneys we have the adrenal glands. Now that red chemical will flow down here and will stimulate the adrenal glands, which sit on top of the kidneys, to secrete those little red and purple and blue bubbles over there, and that's adrenaline and cortisol. And you need that. You need cortisol is fantastic in small quantities for helping to build memory. Adrenaline keeps you alert, keeps you focused, all in small quantities. So as that happens, now you've built the memory. Then what will happen? And as you start relaxing and as the memory starts to build, then these chemicals will then flow up to the pituitary. These adrenaline and the cortisol will flow up to the pituitary, will bathe the pituitary, and will tell the pituitary it's cool, relax. The memory's being built, the people are focused, the attention is there, you can stop squirting out the yellow and the red chemical, and the cycle actually stops. And you go into a settled state of processing and building memory. And as soon as you lose attention again, your body will shift back into that cycle. You'll start secreting the yellow and the red and the green and the blue there in small quantities. And when there's enough, it'll go back, and it will cause the pituitary to stop secreting, and that is a very positive cycle. Short bursts of those chemicals for short periods of time, not long periods of time, and when that happens, you build memory, and that's good, that's great. However, now we shift over into stage 2. If you have an internal stressor, so the external stressors come in. Now let's say that you have an internal, somewhere in your magic breeze, you've activated some toxic thought that says, I just can't take all this information in. It's just too much for me. I'm not going to be able to process this information. And you have this whole toxic thing being activated maybe from school days or from your past where you really battled maybe to sit and concentrate or something like that. And suddenly that thing starts coming up. That memory starts coming up. And what that will do is that memory will then send another message down to the hypothalamus to say, listen, I'm in a state. I'm worried. I can't do this. I couldn't do this at school. How am I going to do this? Now I can't remember all this information. And you start sending this emotionally chaotic message down to the hypothalamus, which will respond to your thought life, and it will start to pump and pulse, and it will start to pump out more yellow, so of that yellow chemical, the chemical that in larger quantities, so now it shifts from being good into negative. Okay, and it starts becoming a fear-based chemical, and it will start drowning when the adrenaline and the cortisol go up there to bathe the pituitary to stop the yellow pumping. There's too much yellow. The yellow will override that, so the yellow doesn't stop pumping. Now, as soon as the yellow pumps into the pituitary, it's going to cause the red to pump, and then the red pumps because that's in large quantities. And then those two will override the controlling effect of that. So then that just doesn't stop pumping. So what you then have is a situation where you have too much yellow, too much red, too much green, and too much blue chaotically flowing through your whole body. Now that is stage 2 of stress. And stage 2 of stress you can stay in for 10, 20, 30 years, because what will happen is that you will shift in and out of stage 2 of stress, because you'll have like a weekend or a holiday, or you go to a movie and you relax, or you have a great time with your kids, and every time you relax, the yellow and red will subside and the whole cycle will calm down and you'll rejuvenate a bit, but then you shift back into it again. And over time you shift into that stage too quickly, so it becomes easier and easier and easier for you to actually shift into that high chemical stage, that negative fear-based chemical stage too quickly. It becomes more and more difficult to control, and eventually after 10 or 20 or 30 years of it, where you even within 5 years, you'll find that you start getting constant aches and pains, and you're getting heart problems, and you're getting digestive problems, and you've got a spastic colon, and suddenly you've got hypertension, and your blood pressure's increasing, and you're getting all these funny illnesses starting in your body, and you're suddenly at the doctor more than you'd like to be, and there's just everything seems to be going wrong with your body, and whatever virus is out there you're catching, and whatever bits of flu you're catching, and that becomes a problem. So what's happening there is that the constant flow of chemicals through your body starts hitting the different organs in your body, and with time you will shift over into stage 3 of stress. So just to summarize stage 2 of stress is the resistance stage. It's called acute long-term stress. It's where the negative feedback loops are blocked. They don't actually work. In other words, that the blue and the red, this, when it flows up there, doesn't work. That's the negative feedback loop that says, it's okay, we've got enough chemicals, we're focused and alert, it stops working. And when it stops working, we have a big problem over here, because then this is going to carry on pumping, as I've said. So stage 2 is where it just doesn't stop pumping. We call this the hypothalamic ACTH loop, and that loop just does not stop pumping, and it carries on and on and on. You get more CRF that's the yellow chemical being secreted. You get more of the red chemical being secreted. You get more cortisol and adrenaline being secreted. The CRF ACTH loop just keeps pumping and pumping. All electrical chemical feedback loops become disrupted. Your body has got 2 types of currency. The one type is electrical and the other type is chemical. So you are actually a combination of electrical, chemical, electromagnetic and chemical cycles that are going through your body, all flowing through in these cycles. We call them the biochemicals that flow in these cycles all the time. And in order for you to be able to actually function properly, these cycles have to continue in a very smooth manner constantly. Now, when we're in a state of stress and we have an excess of those chemicals, it disrupts those feedback loops, and that's what starts making us sick. So all these electrochemical feedback loops become disrupted and we get sick, and then we start feeling funny. You'll find your thinking, your memory becomes foggy. You have a lack of creativity. You start feeling tense. You start feeling sick, anxious, depressed, overwhelmed, out of control, wanting to give up as you progress through stage 2. That means that this whole pituitary, this whole cycle just does not stop pumping. This yellow and the red is just it's constantly pumping through your body. When that pumps through your body, you can't hear your heart, because the ANF that is secreted from your heart, which calms you down and helps your free will to make good decisions, is blocked out by all the stress chemicals. The cortisol, when it flows through your brain, as cortisol flows through your brain, remember the dendrites? As cortisol flows over them, they just shrink like this. They just absolutely shrink. When you go into an exam and you have a sudden panic attack and you go completely blank, that's what it looks like. Cortisol, a rush of cortisol into your brain, an excessive rush of cortisol makes these plump down. Once the cortisol levels drop, these will plump up again. But over time, excessive amounts of cortisol will actually move through your brain, and like battery acid, they will literally corrode and break off those little branches. So you literally will have broken memories on your dendrites from that cortisol. So cortisol over time is destructive. If it's in large quantities, it's not supposed to flow except for burst and then stop, a burst and then stop, a burst and then stop, not a constant flow. So stress, a burst of stress is healthier than constant daily stress. That drip, 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 drip of constant daily stress completely confuses your whole immune system and puts your whole body into a complete state of illness, mentally and physically. Okay, so stage 3 of stress is the exhaustion stage. This is the death cycle, literally. The stress system just never stops reacting. The organs don't relax. Basically, you have organ and system breakdown, you have tissue damage, you even have changes occurring at the cellular level. Your cells have memory and they even change. I'm going to show you pictures of that right now. Now that is not a strawberry, that is actually a cell. It looks like strawberries and cream. Okay, that is a cell, and on the outside of the cell is the cell membrane, and those little bumps on there are what we call receptors. Now those receptors over there respond to the chemicals that flow through your body. So here are all the chemicals flowing through your body, and you have many biochemicals flowing through your body, peptides and hormones and steroids and all kinds of things flowing through your body. And as they flow through your body, they carry a photocopy of memories from your head, and they carry emotion. So they're called information, emotion molecules. Okay, now those things flow through your body, connecting the mind, the brain with the body, and talking to each other and communicating with each other. They flow through all the extracellular fluid in your body, the blood, and through they flow. That's how they get through your body. They move through your body. Now they flow over a cell, and if we just imagine that I've taken a piece of that, and there's the cell membrane in green. So I've taken just a piece of that, and there's 2 receptors over there, 2 of those little red bumps over there. They have a very specific shape. They don't just have a random shape, they have a very specific shape. I just made them little hearts for fun. Okay, now what will happen is that red chemical can only go in there, but the yellow chemical can't. In other words, they're specific. And what happens is that little red chemical vibrates as it's passing through. It literally is like a symphony playing, like an orchestra playing. It's like your body's, they call it your body's music. And it vibrates, and as it passes over the receptor, it passes over, and then that will have a corresponding vibration which will match, and then it will go into the correct place, go into the cell, drop its information there so metabolism can happen, life can happen, the cell can function like it should, growth, repair, whatever the cell needs to be doing, and then it passes back out again and goes and moves through the body. Now, then the yellow one won't fit in there, but the red one will, and so on. That's how it works. So they're specific. Now, at the same time as all the good chemicals flowing, we also have bad chemicals flowing. We have cancer cells flowing through our body at all stages, and our immune system will send out little killer cells that will go and kill those cancer cells. We have viruses. The immune system sends out killer cells to go and kill them. But if you are stressed, what will happen is that let's start with the not stressed. If you're not stressed, the little cancer cell the little cancer chemical cell will float past you, will try and get in, but it can't get in because you've got a nice healthy cell receptor, and it will go on, and the immune system will come and kill it and get rid of it. The Rio virus, which is the cold and flu virus, will float through here, try and get in, can't get in, get killed by the immune system. And so that's the normal system. And if you're just in stage 1 of stress, that's what will happen. But if however you shifted to stage 2 of stress, look what happens. The excessive amount of cortisol, the red, the yellow, the green and the blue, all those different stress chemicals, and there's a whole lot of others too, but those are the main ones. As they flow through, they corrode like battery acid, and they corrode that cell receptor. So anything can drop in. So whatever's floating past will just drop in. So the stuff that your cell needs plus what it doesn't need drops in. That is why when you are very stressed out, it's easier to catch a flu bug and to catch a cold and to get all those little funny things that are going around. And people talk about MS and yuppie flu and that kind of thing, being, chronic fatigue syndrome, that kind of thing, where you're constantly feeling sick and tired and catching everything. That is just basically when you have shifted towards the end of stage 2 of stress, and you've got so much of this in your body that anything that's out there hits you, which is exhausting. So you feel constantly exhausted because your poor cell receptors are just accepting everything that's floating around. Everything that you inhale, everything that goes in your body is just floating around, and it's going into your cells and making you exhausted. So that is a problem over there. But fortunately, within 4 days, you can change your neural circuitry, and your neural circuitry is linked to your body's linked to your brain. You can change that back. That through changing your thought life, through watching how you deal with toxic thinking. That is simply a result of toxic thinking. Stress is the reaction. The stress is the deep limbic system taking your thought life and converting it into a physical reaction. There is a physical reaction. The disruption on the cell membrane, which then allows anything to just enter into the cells of the body, disrupting the way in which the body actually functions. So we can change that. By changing your thought life, that can heal, and that can revert back to that. God is an awesome God that He created our body. We can mess it up for years, and within 4 days we can start healing. But as I said, it's a constant, ongoing process. It's not something that just happens like that. You can't just do it once and expect it to be done. You have to do it constantly. All the time you have to work at this process of your thought life. It begins and it ends in the brain, because whatever starts here will cause this whole cascade of electrical chemical reactions in your body. So if we move on, how do you feel at stage 3? All organs on heightened alert for too long. The adrenal cortex is enlarged. The spleen, lymph nodes, thymus, immune system shrink. The entire immune system becomes depleted. Your blood sugar pressure increases. Memory and all mental functions will decrease. You get very ill. You feel a loss of control, failure, trap, self-doubt. These are just a few. Over time, the mind simply burns out, and you go into emotional black hole, and death can result as well from that. So stage 3 is dangerous. We tend to stay in stage 1. Well, stage 1 is good, as we know. Stage 2, people stay in for the longest period of their life. Most people are living in stage 2 for most of their life. Then they suddenly shift over into stage 3, and that's where we see the big illnesses coming in. And they are saying, the medical research is saying that 87% of those big illnesses are coming from our thought life. So that's something that we need to be aware of, and that we can actually change. We can actually influence the way in which our bodies are actually functioning. This is an actual slide of what it looks like in the brain chemically. When you are stressed, look at this. Can you see this here? The squirts, the excessive squirts of adrenaline and cortisol, when it should be calmer. That's a calm. All those squirts over there, that firing over there, is chaos in your brain. And that chaos of those chemicals, now those chemicals are carrying memories. They are carrying electrical impulses. They are carrying emotions. They are carrying electromagnetic fields around them. And when they're chaotic, your head's chaotic, your heart's chaotic, you're going to be sick. You're going to find that all your chemicals, all those peptide loops, all the electrical chemical loops are disrupted. They can't flow normally. It's almost as though there's chewing gum in those loops, and they get stuck, and they're shooting here and they're shooting there, and that's just going to throw your body out completely. What you think affects your whole body. We cannot ever forget that. What you think affects your whole body. Now let's track this. This is the most fascinating thing. When I did this research, it fascinated me. When those chemicals in stage 2 and stage 3 are coursing through your body at will, just madly going through your body like that picture, moving through your body, they don't move randomly through your body. This I found so interesting. They actually move in a very specific sequence of attack. And the first area that those chemicals will attack is your cardiovascular system, your heart. So it's literally like they all go and they say, right, let's go here, boys, heart first. And they go there and they hit the heart and they start attacking the heart. And you start finding angina, heart attack problems, high blood pressure, stroke, aneurysms. All these things start happening as a result of these chemicals hitting there first. Now, if you think of it, your heart pumps blood. The life is in the blood. If you think of the plan of attack of the enemy, if you can kill the life of a person, if you can start squeezing the life of a person, you've already started winning the battle. So before it even gets in your head, you're still clear thinking at this stage. When those stress chemicals are coursing through your body, they first go to your heart. So your mind is still focused, alert, clear, hasn't been affected yet. It's first your heart. So you start getting, your heart starts getting weak and your blood pressure increases or drops or angina, all these different things. So the life in the blood, it starts getting attacked. We often hear of young men in the prime of their life who've never seemed to have had a day's sickness, dropping down dead in the gym. That is also from the not dealing with toxic thinking, hiding it all their life, suppressing those emotions, and eventually that stress just built up and built up and built up, and wham, it hit the heart and dropped down dead. The immune system, the next area to attack is the defense system. So it goes from the life to the defense system. So then it moves through to the immune system. And the immune system is what defends us. So if you can break down the defense, if you think of a battle, fighting a battle, if you can get to the life of of your opposition that you're fighting, if you can start squeezing the life, and if you can start breaking down the defenses, you're going to win the battle. So if you see these chemicals like a battle, if you see this whole thing like a whole bunch of little demons carrying these chemicals, going to your heart, attacking your heart, getting the life out of you, then going to your immune system and attacking your immune system. I mean, those are just some of the things that come out of the immune system disorders from your thought life. So your thought life, putting you toxic thinking into stress, will attack your immune system, and those can be the result of your immune system being attacked. For example, when your immune system if you have this constant drip of stress, your immune system becomes completely confused and it starts secreting blood proteins called cytokines, and that will then cause you to get headaches and depression and fatigue and all that kind of thing, and your body starts getting an autoimmune response. Let's take, for example, something like lung cancer. Some of the latest research in lung cancer, if someone smokes, your immune system will send out little macrophages to go and clean up, literally go and vacuum up all the dust in your lungs, and then you have another puff and out they come again, and another puff and out they come. Eventually there's so many macrophages trying to clean up all the smoke and this mess in your lungs that they start mutating. So your body, you have an autoimmune response where your body starts attacking itself. So what was meant for good becomes bad. It's like the cortisol. In small amounts it's good, in large amounts it becomes bad, and then they mutate, and that basically causes lung cancer. And that's the macrophages move through your whole body, and that's why often from lung cancer it metastasizes through to the rest of your body, or moves to the rest of your body, and you get so many other parts of your body being affected by cancer as well. They have done direct research linking cancer to your thought life. There's literally not any disease yet that I have seen that hasn't been linked back somewhere down the line, tracked back to your thought life. They're saying 87% from the thought life, 13% from environment and genetics. So that's more or less what the statistics are, 13 to 20% from environment and genetics. So those are very important, but our thought life is more powerful than those other things. What you think is what you get. It's so true. Then it starts hitting, by this stage, your life is getting sucked out of you, your defense systems have been broken, and now it hits your brain. Now you start getting the central nervous system problems. So you start getting depression, phobias, panic attacks, fatigue, lethargy, exhaustion, insomnia, lack of peace, fogged thinking, poor memory. All these things start hitting you, and by this stage depression can really become a big issue, because now you really, by this stage you're feeling sick, because those things have really got going. I just want to make a point here. Not everyone will have a problem there and there and there. It depends where your genetic weakness is. Because of original sin, we are not perfect in our bodies. So we have genetic things that do come through in our bodies. So if you have a great heart, then it's going to go through, make you feel a little bit of maybe high blood pressure, maybe you'll get a little bit of angina, but you won't necessarily get a heart attack. Someone who's got a weakness there may have an actual heart attack. or a stroke. Stroke being a lack of blood, you don't get enough blood going to the brain. In terms of maybe that it passes by your heart and goes through to the immune system, and maybe it hits your pancreas, or it hits your skin, or whatever. So in other words, wherever your area of weakness is, that's where you're going to see the most problems in your body. Okay, so then it may pass by both of those and you just get like nagging illnesses, but it hits your brain, and boy, then the depression sets in, and then the foggy thinking, and then the insomnia and whatever. That may be your area of weakness. A merry heart doeth good like medicine, but a broken spirit drieth the bones. Now those aren't just nice little metaphors in the Bible. God put them there. They are so filled with truth, it's unbelievable. Because if you are happy, if your thinking is happy, that means that your heart is secreting that A and F. That means your body's at peace. That means that you're staying in stage 1 and not going to stage 2 and 3 of stress. That means that you're healthy. A broken spirit drieth the bones. When you've got that toxic thinking, you can get things like osteoporosis, because if that's your area of weakness, it's going to hit that area, and you're going to get your bones are going to become a problem. Your bones are going to literally dry out. So wherever your area of weakness is, those chemicals will flow through, it will find that area of weakness, and it will cause the problem in that area of weakness. Be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your wrath. You must never keep anger. Those toxic thinking is going to put your body into stage 2 and eventually stage 3 of stress. In the last days, men's hearts shall fail them because of fear. People drop down dead from you hear of these people with voodoo rituals, and they drop down dead from that incredible burst of fear, which will go straight to the heart. That rush of those stress chemicals shoops to the heart, drop down dead. My heart is sick, withered like grass, and I've lost my appetite. When that A and F is not being released from the heart because of your toxic thinking, you feel terrible. Your whole body, you just feel like melting, withered. As a man thinks in his heart, so is he. So if you thinking in your heart and your brain and your heart, that whole link, that's who you are. As you think, I didn't say it, God said it. How you think is who you are. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. What's here and here is what's going to come out. And what comes out goes in again. Whatever you hear goes in through your 5 senses. So if you're speaking from a negative thought, you're going to then reinforce that negative thought. And that's not a good thing, because you're then reinforcing something on a constant negative basis. Then the next area to be hit is your digestive system. So you suffer things, constipation, diarrhea, vomit, or fertility, growth of children. Stress can reduce children's the growth hormone by 87%. It's scary. Muscular tension. How many times do we have sore necks and sore throats? Arthritis, the common cold, reovirus. That cold virus cannot get in unless you've caused those little receptors to go all rigid from a huge amount, all open from a huge amount of stress. Children, what are they doing to me? Stress in children. This is another thing. Children take 18 years for their brains to grow. It takes 18 years. So in other words, the stress that children experience is much worse than what we experience. But it's catastrophic. That's to put it mildly. What we experience as severe stress for them is catastrophic, because the brain is growing. It's in a developmental phase. It's very vulnerable. It's very susceptible. So what children go through in terms of stress is more than what adults even go through. But the behavior, the patterns for adulthood are set up in childhood. The research has shown that children that are exposed to excessive levels of stress before the age of 12, you increase their chance of cancer by 30%, which is huge amounts. So hot housing, we get the concept of hot housing, where we try and make our children do 10 million different things and different activities all afternoon. The average child on the planet today is spending longer time in school than an average CEO of a company, of a large corporation. And they're supposed to be playing. Hot housing is where the children don't play anymore. They're just going from one extra lesson to the next, one thing, and then they come home and they blimp in front of the TV because they are so stressed out, they cannot cope with their stress. We need to teach our children to play. We need to let them get out there, roll in the sand, build sand castles, play with the dog, roll down the grass, get away from the TV, de-stress them. You cannot, research has shown that if you try and force children to go beyond and to progress quicker through academics than what they are designed to do, you are decreasing their intellect because of stress. The stress will actually impair the central nervous system functioning, and you're actually going to impair the whole way in which they function. Research has also shown us that pregnant mothers, when they're very, very stressed out, nearly 60% of oxygen is channeled away from that baby. So the baby experiences severe stress in the womb as well. We need to be very careful about how we expose our children to stress. Children do not have the same linguistic skills as adults. They do not have those extension cords plugged into the prefrontal cortex. They do not have any parts of their brain being fully developed. So as parents, as educators, as teachers, as leaders, as pastors, we need to be able to guide our children and walk them through what they're going through. Children can't express their emotions and verbalize as well as what they can, so it'll come out in a behavioral problem. They are finding, even though ADD is 80% they're neurobiological and genetic, they are finding a lot of ADD symptoms coming from classroom-induced stress and stressful living. So we have a huge responsibility and a huge importance to reduce stress in our children's lives in terms of letting them have fun, letting them play more, giving them more love. One of the best ways of dealing with stress in children is play and love. Give them lots of love, hugs, touches, and play. Reduce the amount of activities. My advice to any parent is don't let your children do more than 2 or 3 activities a week, and those activities should be fairly physical and creative. So maybe 2 sports days and 1 art day or a music day or piano playing. Playing the piano, playing some kind of musical instrument is a fantastic way of de-stressing. It shifts, your musical intelligence in your brain is in this part of your brain where I'm pointing to now, and it shifts down into your deep limbic system in an area called the basal ganglia. And when that is, even if they don't play well, by playing a musical instrument, it calms down a lot of that chaotic thinking that has been stimulated through all the stimulation that our children are exposed to in daily life. We're seeing a lot of problems happening with children in this day and age. 20 years ago, we had the biggest problem was chewing gum and not throwing things in the dustbin. Now our biggest problem is children have to be screened for guns in the school. We have got a big responsibility to help de-stress our children, not to just de-stress ourselves, but to de-stress our children as well. Thank you.
For more information on your body, His temple, write Life Outreach International, P.O. Box 98, 2000, Fort Worth, Texas 76182, or call the prayer line at 1-817-685-5000. You can also visit us on the web at lifetoday.org or at the following web addresses: